This is an ABC podcast.
Opus Dei is a part of the Catholic Church. It's known for people who whip themselves, apparently, to show their love for God. And one of our next state leaders has links to them. We're going to talk to an Opus Dei member soon on this podcast. Hello, Avani Dias here. And we're going to get into the Brumbies debate. Some people see them as a special symbol of Australia. Now, thousands will be culled for environmental reasons.
My intention to nominate today as the Liberal leader of the Parliamentary Party.
On Triple J.
Yeah, the next person in line to become a leader of an Australian state has links to Opus Dei, a strict and controversial part of the Catholic Church. His name is Dom Perrottet. He's set to take over from Gladys Berejiklian as New South Wales Premier. She dramatically stepped down on Friday over a corruption investigation. And Dom Perrottet has some divisive views, like being anti-abortion and anti-same-sex marriage, as Shalila Medora reports.
Even slasher flicks don't have bloodbaths this gruesome. New South Wales political leaders are dropping like flies. First, Premier Gladys Berejiklian resigned on Friday after the state's corruption watchdog announced it'd be investigating her. Yesterday, Transport Minister Andrew Constance announced he was quitting New South Wales politics to have a tilt at federal politics.
I've got a lot of passion. There's a lot of issues that I still want to see resolved for our country.
And then this morning, Deputy Premier and Leader of the Nationals, John Barilaro, said sayonara.
I am leaving politics and I'll look to a new career. I turned 50 in November, maybe a bit of a midlife crisis, but I'm definitely thinking about what's next. I'm going to take some time out.
And if you're wondering if this has anything to do with the investigation into Ms Berejiklian by the Independent Commission Against Corruption, or ICAC, well, journos were wondering that too.
The ICAC investigation, are you required to give evidence? Is that the reason behind this?
First rule of Fight Club is not talk about Fight Club. Remember that from a great movie. Firstly, if you are you've been subpoenaed or anything from the ICAC, you actually aren't allowed to talk about it. But more than that, I've learned in my time in politics, leave the ICAC stuff alone.
So what happens now? The New South Wales Liberal Party will decide on its new leader tomorrow. This guy, Dominic Perrottet, who is currently the Treasurer, is likely to be picked as leader, as he's expected to have the numbers to win.
We believe that this is a team that will provide stability, unity and experience to continue the great work of Premier Gladys Berejiklian.
But it's not a done deal as yet.
We have a vote tomorrow. That's a great democratic tradition, and I'm putting my name forward.
Planning Minister Rob Stokes is also having a tilt at the leadership.
I feel very confident that I have every chance of being successful. But after all, the main game here is to give a choice to the people of the party room, that the members of Parliament who represent the Liberal Party in New South Wales.
New South Wales will have a number of by-elections to fill the vacancies of the MPs who've jumped ship. A by-election is a vote outside of the usual state elections. As ABC analyst Anthony Green says, it's unlikely the whole state will go to the polls again before the scheduled 2023 state election.
So there's not going to be an early election. If the government lost all three by-elections, there's a potential change of government or an early election. But I don't think the government's going to lose all three by-elections.
So what's the state going to look like under the possible leadership of Dominic Perrottet? First of all, he's super young, 39. If he's chosen, he'll be the youngest premier the state has ever had. But that doesn't mean he's progressive.
This is a man who believes in family, believes in traditional values, believes in small government.
Mr Perrottet is deeply religious, with links to the Catholic group Opus Dei.
I think everyone's faith plays a role in terms of the way that they look at issues.
He's got 6 kids and is from the conservative right of the New South Wales Liberal Party.
He's the great hope in Australia for political conservatives.
Mr Perrottet has attracted a bit of controversy over past decisions. He opposed laws to force Catholic priests to tell police if another priest admitted during confession to sexually abusing children. He's also stated his religious opposition to both same-sex marriage and decriminalising abortion.
It's naturally an emotional issue and people have strong views either way.
He praised Donald Trump's 2016 election victory, saying in that post, if you question man-made climate change, you're not a skeptic. He's also blamed welfare payments for a breakdown in marriages and people choosing not to have kids.
The welfare state was acting as a substitute for the family
crowding out its formation and increasing rates of divorce.
And more recently, there was a stoush between Mr Perrottet and Ms Berejiklian over lockdowns. Mr Perrottet wanted to open up quicker, saying businesses were hurting. He hasn't ruled out doing that if he's chosen as Premier. And there'll be a lot of questions about how Mr Perrottet deals with the pandemic going forward. If he plans on opening up earlier, what does that mean for the rest of the country? He's indicated he'll put the economy first if he takes on the top job.
I am completely focused and have been during this time as Treasurer on making sure we keep people safe, we keep people in jobs and we keep businesses open.
Hack on Triple J.
Shalala Medora with that story. We just heard that Dom Perrottet has links to Opus Dei. He went to an Opus Dei school. Some of his kids go to one as well. Let's talk to Richard Vella, who is from Opus Dei in Australia. He's also a member of the Labor Party. Thanks for your time, Richard. Opus Dei, it's technically part of the Catholic Church. You share some similar beliefs, but how is it different to the sort of more mainstream Catholicism that people know?
Well, thanks, Savani. I'd say that Opus Dei is mainstream Catholicism. It's one of many institutions in the Catholic Church that offers people additional support and guidance to live out their faith. So it's not true to say that we have different beliefs. We actually have this, what Opus Dei teaches and what people in Opus Dei believe is what the Catholic Church believes. So it's not any different from what Pope Francis or the church itself teaches.
I guess the most well-known kind of reflection of Opus Dei is in the Da Vinci Code. One character who was part of it whips himself in that, and a few people may have heard of that, the religion through there. Can you explain self-inflicted discomfort and how that's sort of a part of the religion?
Well, firstly, it's not a religion. So Opus Dei is an institution in the Catholic Church.
Sure,
that's
like the teachings of Opus Dei, I guess.
Okay, well, I think, remember, Da Vinci Code is fiction, okay? It was a great page turner back in the early noughties, and the movie wasn't as successful, but hey, it was great fiction. And the thing is that that depiction of Opus Dei is not the reality. For one, there are no monks in Opus Dei. There are no, I don't know if they're albinos, but there are no albino monks in Opus Dei, sure. Okay? And the message of Opus Dei is not about that stuff. The message of Opus Dei is about ordinary people trying to find God in what they do every day, okay? It's a very simple message. Not easy to achieve, but it's something that all of us have guidance from Opus Dei to try and achieve that.
Can you explain, though, obviously it may not be that intense as it is in the Da Vinci Code, as you say, but an element of it, right, for a lot of people in Opus Dei are things like, I guess, depriving yourself to show discipline and so on, sleeping without a pillow, I was reading, you know, taking cold showers, that kind of stuff. Can you explain that whole situation?
Look, okay, I think all of us in life sometimes have to go through a bit of self-sacrifice to reach a goal, you know, whether it be going to the gym or wearing different types of clothes or putting up with juggling many things in our household and home life and this sort of stuff. So for people in Opus Dei, that's the central thing. It's the ordinary stuff. What you see in Da Vinci Code is not true, and it's just totally out of proportion. But to come back to your question, look, the ordinary stuff in life, like trying to manage your schedule, trying to juggle your stuff, trying to put on a happy face at home, that's the central message of Opus Dei. It's the ordinary stuff that we try and live, you know, for the sake of other people and to try and keep connected to God.
Okay, can you explain, I guess, some of the secrecy that's involved with Opus Dei that a lot of people don't disclose they're a member of it?
Well, the thing is that being a part of Opus Dei, so I'm a member of Opus Dei, I have no problem in telling people that. That for me is my own decision, like to make that commitment for life, to be a part of Opus Dei and to try and, as I said before, to try and find God and the ordinary stuff of my day-to-day life. Now, that's a personal thing for me. Many people have their own spirituality, their own beliefs. That's not something that each person needs to advertise, you know, it's a deeply personal thing. So when people ask me about what I believe in, or I will mention that. But I will mention it because they know me and we have a friendship or some sort of relationship. But I don't go around saying, "Oh, I'm Richard and I'm a member of Opus Dei." No, I don't do that. Like it's a personal or even a private thing.
So do you feel like it is something that is more secretive than other religions? Because certainly that's what a lot of the reporting and a lot of members of Opus Dei have said. You know, it is different to some, broader, more mainstream parts of religion. I know you say Opus Dei is as well, but it is quite small when you look at it in proportion to other religions. So why is that secretiveness a part of it?
Well, I would say it's not secretive. It's I think perhaps people get confused because we don't go around. Like I don't wear any different type of clothing. I don't dress like as a priest or as a religious brother. Or I'm just a normal lay person, right? So now, as I said, if people want to know about me and my friends do, I will tell them. But I'm not looking for brownie points from anyone to say, hey, I've made this commitment, so therefore I'm somehow set apart from anyone else. I'm no better than anyone else being an Opus Dei. I get a lot of help from Opus Dei, but it's not an issue of secrecy at all.
All right. Richard, Opus Dei has had a lot of connections to Australian politics on both sides for many years. Why is it such a part of that?
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know really whether Opus Dei has had a big influence on politics. I mean,
well, there have been lots of leaders of both Labor and Liberal who have connections to Opus Dei. Why do you feel that it is so prolific in that section, considering, there are not that many Australians who are a part of it?
Well, look, I think the message of Opus Dei basically is attractive, and that is that what we do every day has enormous value before God, and it's an opportunity to serve people around us. And I think many people would be attracted to that message. I don't agree that there are many people who are associated with Opus Dei in politics, but I do think that many people who have drive and ambition to serve and ambition to make a contribution to society will get the message of Opus Dei, because that is very much a part of it, yeah?
Richard, obviously the reason why we're talking to you is because of Dom Perrottet, who's in line to, take over the New South Wales leadership. Is he someone who you've seen around at your events and so on?
Well, I do know Dominic, mainly because I live in the Hills area of Sydney, so a lot of his family are from this part of the world, but yeah.
Is he a member of Opus Dei?
I don't comment on anyone's particular membership. He's gone on record about that, so you can ask him, but he has gone on record about that, but I don't want to...
Sure.
It's not for me to make a commentary on any person at all. Okay?
All right. Well, Richard Vella, I appreciate you chatting to us because it's a part of, I guess, society that we don't hear too much of and has been really interesting.
No worries. Thanks a lot.
A lot of people texting in. Christian and Baxter self-sacrifice to achieve goals and masochism are two very different tenets. Someone else has texted, how can he call himself a Catholic? I'm Catholic and we call them fanatics. Opus Dei are the ones that call the popes people. When ordinary priests give Holy Communion to gay people, they are against anything progressive in the Catholic Church.
Aerial culling is both ethically the best way to manage horses and it's the only practical way to reduce horse numbers.
On Triple J.
All right, you are listening to Hack. I'm Avni Dyes, and you know the Banjo Paterson poem, The Man from Snowy River. It's kind of an icon of Australiana, and at the centre of it are wild horses, or brumbies. Some people have this emotional connection to them, but they're actually an introduced species, which scientists say are destroying the environment, and that's led to years of debate over what to do with them. When the political drama was going down on Friday, a plan was dropped to cull 11,000 of them. Want to know your thoughts? Text in. Do you think it's time to just cull brumbies once and for all in Australia? 0439 757 555. Text in. Joe Lauder has this story.
I had no idea it was this complex when I first realised that these horses were causing enormous damage in Kosciuszko.
This is Professor Don Driscoll. He's a conservation ecologist at Deakin University, and for years he's been studying the impact of feral horses, or brumbies, in the Australian high country in New South Wales and Victoria. Put simply, brumbies are introduced animals, and the Australian landscape hasn't evolved to handle these heavy animals with hooves.
Well, that cause a whole range of impacts, particularly to those high elevation wetlands. So there's critically endangered bogs and fens in the Australian Alps, including Kosciuszko, and the horses need to drink every day, so they go into these wetlands and completely destroy the structure of the moss and peat in those ecosystems. This causes erosion, and the underlying soil dries out as well. So yeah, really big impacts.
For years, there have been calls to cut back the number of wild horses in the Kosciuszko National Park in southern New South Wales. On Friday, the New South Wales government released its draft management plan for wild horses in Kosciuszko. It estimates there are 14,000 horses in the park, and they want to reduce that number to 3,000 over the next 6 years. Professor Driscoll says it's still too many.
So 3,000 in Kosciuszko is basically a death sentence for some of those ecosystems and potentially some of the species.
Under the new plan, the aim is to have 2/3 of the park brumby-free and to keep them in the remaining third. Professor Driscoll thinks that's pretty outrageous.
It allocates 1/3 of the national park to feral horses. So this is supposed to be a national park that conserves our native species, but they've given over 1/3 to one feral species. It's just beggars belief.
This is just the most recent plan to manage this issue. In 2018, the New South Wales government released a proposal to cull 90% of the feral horses in Kosciuszko over a 20-year period. It was very controversial. But then, instead of pushing through with the cull, the government flipped and introduced the Brumby Bill. It recognised the heritage value of brumbies in the Australian high country and banned lethal culling. The bill was a huge win for brumby lovers. Alan Lanyon is one of them. He's the president of the Brumby Sustainability and Management Group.
I've always had an affinity for the brumbies as part of the high country ever since I first went into that country 40-odd years ago. Since then, I've been a recreational horse rider throughout that country.
Alan thinks the government has seriously overestimated the number of brumbies in the park.
The fact that National Parks and Wildlife Service have chosen to quote a figure of 14,000 horses in the north end of Kosciuszko National Park is a gross misrepresentation of fact.
As far as the plan goes, Alan says they want to see a reasonable number of horses in the park.
It's always been our position that any population should be subject to management, sustainable management, but we would say that as a starting point, there has to be a starting point. So we would say, yeah, we'll endorse that 3,000.
Another tricky issue here has been how the horses would be culled. In the past, there's been a strong pushback against any shooting, including from helicopters or on the ground. Under this plan, only ground shooting would be used, as well as trapping and rehoming when it's possible.
We don't support ground shooting, unless the obvious one there is the fact that the horse may be ill or injured or something like that.
Well, this feral horse issue has moved beyond science. The issue has become a sort of flashpoint in culture wars.
That's Professor Jamie Pittock from ANU's Fenner School of Environment. He says the best outcome to protect Australia's native ecosystem is to have no feral horses in the national park.
In one area in Victoria where there's just 100 horses, Parks Victoria has determined that just 100 horses causes too much damage to threaten plant communities, that they're planning to remove them all.
Professor Pittock says these endangered species have nowhere else in the world to go.
The alpine plants and animals are in a pretty desperate state because in Australia, less than 1% of our land area are these high mountain peaks that are cold enough and wet enough for these different kinds of species to survive. And with climate change, this habitat is under even greater threat.
You're listening to Hack on Triple J.
Joe Lauder with that story, and the text line's so divided on this. Claire in Greenthorpe says it's controlled culling to manage herd numbers. They need to be managed properly before they ruin the natural environment. Someone else, dingoes are an introduced species. Should we get rid of them as well? Yeah, text me your thoughts. What do you think of This move to cull more brumbies, 0439757555. So Anthony Sharwood has been investigating this. He's written a book. It's called The Brumby Wars. Thanks for your time. Can you explain firstly why so many Australians have this connection to brumbies?
Yeah, look, it was great listening to those people you got, and well done to you and your producers because you got the right people. People like Alan Lanyon, who you had on, and he lives in Gundagai, and I had a beer with him on his back porch, as part of my book research. But he's a good example of a bloke who, it's not just blokes, it's women, it's everybody. It's a lot of people who love the brumbies because they represent a symbol of post-colonial Australia. They have links to stories told by Lynn Mitchell in her Sell the Brumby books that so many Australian kids read when they were young. The brumbies have links to Banjo Patterson, who wrote about them. The brumbies are in a way a symbol of, you have to understand that in the high country where there is sensitive landscapes, as your scientists described, they got rid of cattle grazing. And they had to, because the land was being churned up. This land that as Jamie Pittock said, is less than 1% of Australia and is like nowhere else. And you had to get rid of the cattle. They were destroying it.
Sure.
So the brumbies are almost an avatar, if you like. They're a symbol of the lost cattle grazing lifestyle up in the hills. So people love them for their symbolism, through their links through stories, also because wild mountain horses are this kind of cool ideas, but...
very romantic. So Anthony, what do you think about the policy then? The fact that they have made this move, there's been debate for several years, but it's almost neither here nor there. It's like, yeah, we'll cull a lot of them, but there'll still be some around, so don't worry.
Okay, here's what's happened. John Barilaro put the first law in place in 2018. You covered that. The first law in Australian history that protects non-native species in a national park. We'd never seen a law anything like it. But even though Barra comes along and goes, right, we're protecting the brumbies for their heritage value, and that is contested, even though he said that, there still had to be a management plan. That was 2018. We've been waiting almost 3.5 years for this management plan. That's what it is. And you're putting a lot of emphasis on culling. Well, there's going to be a tiny bit of culling. Environmentalists would argue there's going to be a lot more. There should be a lot more, but basically we're talking about a reduction in the herd size from current estimates of 14,000 to 3,000. Now, when parkies, as in park rangers, first identified a massive brumby problem in the late 1990s in Kosciuszko National Park, there was a lot less than that 3,000. So they've gone, holy cow, we've got nearly 2,000 brumbies. They're churning the place to bits. This is not good. This is a massive problem. Now, the goalposts have shifted so far that we're actually talking about we'll reduce them to 3,000. We'll reduce them to 1,000 more than when they were declared a massive problem, and that's a win for the environment. So the Brumby people have owned this debate all the way. John Barilaro was their captain and coach. He's seen it through. I don't think there's too much doubt that part of the reason he's quit is now that the Brumby legislation is done and dusted with the plan of management set to be in place. But long story short, there are a lot more Brumbies than Kosciuszko can handle, but people love them. And that's what my book, The Brumby Wars, is about. It's about speaking to people on all sides, from the scientists to Alan Lanyon and everyone in between, and trying to work out a solution. And, I've argued in the Sydney Morning Herald today, you can read my story there, that we're pretty close. This plan does have more Brumbies than what Kosci can handle by a long, long way, but it is a commitment to reduce them, not just the number, but the area of the park in which they'll be.
There are a lot of people texting on this. Jake in the Blue Mountains says, I'm an environmentalist and animal lover, but I'm happy the cull is finally going ahead and tired of the issues being so politicised. Another person in agreement, yes, all Brumbies should be culled along with the rest of any introduced animals. We should be prioritising our native species above all else. Anthony, we are about to wrap up, but in about a minute, how do we learn from this debate that we've seen for so many years, considering native species, the protection of them? It can be hard if introduced species are pretty cute and majestic or, people have connections to them. Where do you feel we should learn as a society?
You know what my book, The Brumby Wars, is about? It's not about wild horses, even though it is. It's about Australians. It's about coming together as Australians. We live in the most polarised world. We argue about everything, whether it's COVID policy or absolutely anything becomes a left, right, or polarised in some other way issue. You ask me, what we've learned. There is a middle ground, and a middle ground's going to make nobody happy. as someone who loves Kosciuszko's ecology and thinks it's a miracle of nature, I'm not happy. Brumby people are not happy that horses are going to be removed and now potentially shot. Everyone's got to suck it up.
All right.
Everyone on all sides. That's the only way as a society we're going to get anywhere is through compromise.
Anthony Sharwood, thanks so much for chatting to us. Anthony is someone who's been writing and investigating the Brumby situation, and his book is called The Brumby Wars.
Hack.
One lucky Australian will win $1 million just for being vaccinated against COVID.
On Triple J.
All right, are you fully vaccinated? You could win $1 million if you do it before mid-December. There's been lots of debate over whether the government should introduce a payment for people who get the vaccine. Labor was pushing for $300, but the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, said it was a vote of no confidence in Australians. Now, a group of philanthropists and corporations have funded the $1 Million Vax Alliance. Craig Winkler is in that group. Thanks for coming on the show. So you founded the software company MYOB. Why did you feel like this is where your money should go?
Well, I think this is one of many things that we need to work on in Australia. But right now, it's the thing that's affecting the most people every day of the week. And for us, it's really about thinking about the most vulnerable people in our community. So for most of us, we can get vaccinated and it's fine and we'll be okay. But for the most vulnerable, if you're someone living in aged care or you've got difficult medical conditions or living with disability, you really need to rely on the rest of us to be highly vaccinated in order to be able to get back out in the community. So that's really why we're engaged in this.
So how does it work, Craig?
It's ridiculously simple, Ebony. So here's how it works. If you get your vaccine, even just your first one, before the end of October, then you can enter the draw for prizes. That's really how it works. So you go to milliondollarvax.com and enter after you've had at least one vaccine before the end of October. And there's two sets of prizes. One is a daily prize, and every single day in October, every one of the 31 days in October, we're drawing 100 people that have entered that day, and they can win a $1,000 ultimate gift card. So it's 100 people every day in October that can win a $1,000 ultimate gift card. And then at the end of October, there'll be a draw for everybody that's entered, and one person who's fully vaccinated will win $1 million cash. It's that simple.
So, Craig, there's been a lot of, pushback from the federal government on this. Labor pushed for $300 for anyone who gets vaccinated, but Scott Morrison was saying, we shouldn't be paying off people who may have health concerns over the vaccine. What do you think about Scott Morrison's view there?
Well, I think the important thing to note here is that we're not trying to win an argument with anybody on any of these points. But all we're saying is if you've decided that you're probably going to get vaccinated sometime, and you've done that with your health professional, then do it in October. Don't delay. So if someone really absolutely positively is determined they don't want to be vaccinated, that is their choice. But anyone that's thinking about it, just hasn't got around to it, October's the time because you could actually win prizes. And I think there is an issue with, paying everybody to be vaccinated, and the research would suggest that for most of the time that's actually not very economically wise. But in this case, it's prizes. People are just doing the right thing anyway, and they get the chance to win some extra rewards. And if that means that we get a higher rate of vaccination and more people do it sooner, actually that's better for our whole community, because there are significant costs in education and business and mental health, for that matter, that go on every day this goes on.
Hack on Triple J.
That is Craig Winkler, who is from the $1 Million Vax Alliance. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Hack. I'll catch you next time.